Well, good evening, and welcome to a very special video. Tonight's cigar is courtesy of Stogie Man 1. Actually it's called a special cigar, and I thought it'd be a very special occasion, considering I'm going to be talking about my 20-year anniversary tonight of ordination. So I thought I would enjoy this very special cigar sent to me by Stogie Man 1. And again, thank you. It's a great cigar. It's called a special cigar. And I'm kind of doing this video a la the late, great Bob Wilkins. Now, some of you who are reside here in California remember Bob Wilkins from his TV show, All Creatures Great and Small. No, Creature Features. Creature Features. And Bob used to smoke a really big cigar. That was his trademark, along with his glasses. And the one thing that Bob had that I don't have very much of anymore is hair. So he had kind of a nice big hairstyle, hairdo, but I don't have that. So, but I got the cigar and the Bob Wilkins glasses, and I thought tonight I'm going to talk to you a little bit about my 20-year anniversary on June 6th of ordination. But before I do that, a couple of shout-outs. First of all, I want to thank again Thomas E.S. Pufendorf for the wonderful tin of Burberry tobacco from Planta Tobacco Company. Very wonderful, beautiful tobacco. And again, I've been enjoying that. Thank you very much there, Thomas. Stephen W. 140, a little shout out to you. Congratulations on getting your Dunhill 838. And it was just really interesting to see that I saw that pipe in your video, and I said, gosh, that looks almost like my my squash tomato, and it turns out it's exactly the same pipe. So I'm glad you got yours. Also, Simone Leduc 77, hello my friend. It's good to see you again and hear from you. He's interested and really looking forward to this particular video. So Simone, this video is mostly, well, not mostly for you, but for people that are like you who are interested in my little ordination there. Okay. And finally, I'd like to put a shout out to a very dear pipe presenter we haven't seen much of in the last 6-7 months. He's been really sick, and that's Old Northern Smoky. And Dan, we haven't forgotten about you. So if you're watching the video this evening or whenever you're watching it, just know that you're in our thoughts and prayers. Okay. So tonight, real quick, all of Bob Wilkins and also John Stanley, who took over for Bob in 1971, I believe, took over the Creatures Features, or was it 77? Maybe, no, 78. I'm sorry, 78. Got my dates wrong there. But I want to affectionately call this I was a YouTube horror host, and there's a reason for that. Now, some of you are probably wondering, he's lost it. He's gone now, so we can switch to another pipe presenter, and you're free to do that. So enjoy. In fact, I probably wouldn't watch this video if I were you, because it's going to be kind of boring. At least I think it would be. But a few of you have expressed an interest. And sometimes I like to kid around with people and tell people that I'm not a real priest, I only play one on YouTube. Actually, I told a bishop that once, and he almost had a heart attack, so I have to be careful how I say that. But I say that with just a little bit of tongue-in-cheek, because on June 6th, 1992, I was ordained a Catholic priest for the Diocese of Sacramento. And by the way, another tie-in with Bob Wilkins. Bob Wilkins started his Creature Features at KCRA Channel 3 in Sacramento. So I have a fondness in my heart for my diocese. So that's probably a good thing, because I love my diocese. It's a very rich diocese, and I mean that in many, many ways. Diversity of people, and diversity of climates, and diversity of geography, and diversity of, you know, urban and rural, and everything in between. So it's a beautiful place to live. Right now we're just starting summer, so it's going to be a little bit warm. I can feel a little warm in the studio here with the light on me. But anyway, so I digress. But I wanted to talk just in little snippets how I came to become a padre, because, and this is going to get a little bit difficult for me maybe to talk about from time to time, because the reality of being a padre in today's world is not what it was when I grew up back in the 50s and the 60s. Although it was a turbulent time in the 60s, when I was growing up as a kid, the thing is that there were still positive images of Catholic priests in the world. When I grew up, I saw movies with Bing Crosby, also a pipe smoker, by the way. Smokes a pipe in Going My Way. And possibly even The Bells of St. Mary's, but definitely in Going My Way with Barry Fitzgerald. He pulls out his little, looks almost like a little, to me it looks like a little cutty pipe. I can't remember exactly, but it's a cute little pipe, and Bing smokes a pipe in that show. But many of the images of a Catholic priest back 50, 60 years ago in TV, film and TV, were extremely positive images. Spencer Tracy in Boys Town, and then I remember even growing up in the 70s, there was a TV movie with Andy Griffith playing a recovering alcoholic priest who was running a halfway house for troubled youths and troubled people. Again, most of the images of priests and nuns, and even the church to some extent, was positive. It didn't have the ugly scandal that it has today. It's very sad and very tragic that the word priest seems to be now the adjective pedophile priest comes to mind to many people. One of the things that eventually led me to become a priest was reading positive stories about images of priests. One in particular when I was at Sac State, taking an acting class, believe it or not. And I want to say this, a lot of people don't know this, but I want to tell you that Tom Hanks and I went to the same school, Sac State. Now Tom Hanks will never tell you that, but he actually was at Sac State. Now I didn't go to classes with Tom Hanks, I would be lying to say that, but we are the same age. Maybe he was there when I was there, I don't know, but anyway. But I remember doing a reading about Sir Alec Guinness, and he played a priest in a movie, and he remembers walking home in costume. Back then priests used to wear more traditional garb, known as a cassock, and it was evening time, and as he was walking from the studio to wherever he was at in his wherever he was going to his dressing room, he had to pass by some children playing, and they were playing hopscotch, and this little girl sees him and she goes, "Oh, Father," and she just runs up and grabs his hand, and she just skips alongside of him and talks, and Alec Guinness later became a Catholic. He said it was very profound how people loved their faith, loved their priests, and it was a very positive, again, a very positive climate where people grew up. I'm a convert, so you know, I kind of was insulated from some of the more negative stories about the evil Catholic nuns slapping your wrists with rulers and being harsh like drill sergeants in the Marine Corps, drill instructors, sorry, in the Marine Corps, drill sergeants in the Army. And so, you know, I still had my idealism kind of untarnished, I guess. And so, but the thing that really made a difference for me was that I actually met a real priest, you know. And actually, before I became a Catholic, I was going to classes at Sierra College. Used to be the summer home of the San Francisco 49ers, back when they were a football team. I remember we had a history of Western civilization class, and the professor was an avowed socialist. And he said he had been inoculated against Christianity for a number of years, so he said he was safe. But it was interesting because we had a very charismatic young woman in the class, and every time the professor McFarland would roll call this young woman when her name was called, remember her name, Pam Iverson, and she would say, "Love, peace, and joy," or "God loves you." And so one day her name was called, and she said, "Love, peace, and joy." At the end, there's a guy that sat right next to me. His name was Norman Mahan, and he was always called last. And he says, "War, hate, and pestilence." And he looked over at the girl and says, "Hey, equal time, you know." So anyway, but McFarland became aware that there were some Christians, very charismatic Christians in his class. And of course, the history of Western civilization is essentially, for a lot of part and parcel, the story of the Catholic faith and the emergence of the Protestant faith, of course, later. But Christendom, and so you can't escape, I guess, the topic of the church and faith to some extent in Christ, and when you go through the history of Western civilization. Anyway, so he would always throw out things like, well, how many of you Christians out there have ever read St. Augustine? You know, how many of you Christians have ever seen, St. Peter's Basilica, or how many of you Christians have ever, and he would always throw out these different authors sometimes. How many of you have read Dostoevsky's The Brothers Karamazov? Great book, by the way. So anyway, one day I was intrigued by all these titles that he'd thrown out there on literature and art and history. And as I was checking out these books, the librarian says, "Oh, young man, I see you're interested in becoming a priest." And I'm kind of doing one of these, looking around going, well, I wonder who he's talking to. And then I realized he was talking to me. Well, I wasn't even Catholic, but all I could say was, well, I guess I've considered it, Well, he said, "Oh, you might be interested in Mount St. Joseph, which is right down the road here." And I went, "What? What do you mean? You mean a place where there's real priests?" And he says, "Yeah, there's a novitiate seminary, and you might want to take a drive up there and check it out." Well, I did. And I have to tell you, at first when I drove up there, it looks like a little bit of Italy in Loomis, California. Olive trees all around. It's on a mountain. It's just beautiful, gorgeous, rolling hills. And so I'm going up there, and my mind's just filled with all sorts of cliches, movie cliches about the church from movies. And I kind of expected the Swiss guards to arrest me and throw me in some kind of a Vatican-esque dungeon. And maybe they might let me out in a few years. Great cigar, by the way. These special cigars, and look how even that is. Beautiful ash on that cigar, and it's a wonderful flavor. Wonderful, just smooth, mellow, rich, delicious. I think this could get the Vatican approval on this one here. So anyway, I get up there, and lo and behold, I get into the courtyard, beautiful courtyard, Spanish, Italian style courtyard, and a door opens. I didn't see anybody, and all of a sudden, down the corridor, down an ambulatory, a door opens, and this little priest comes out, little guy with a little bit of wispy reddish hair, and he says, "Hi." And I thought, I thought he was going to tell me, "What are you doing here? Who are you? You don't have special Vatican clearance to be here," that kind of thing. And all he said was, "Hi, let me show you around." "Let me show you around?" "Okay, sure." I introduced myself, and so he took me on the grand tour of the property, the seminary, and finally we ended up at the chapel. And he said, would you like to stay for dinner?" And being a college student, you ask one question: is it free? And I says, "Yes, it's free, but first we have to go to Mass, and then after Mass we'll have dinner." And I went, Mass, Mass, Mass. Oh, it's that Catholic thing. Okay. So anyway, I went to my very first Catholic Mass. I was probably 23 years old. And I want to say, I don't want to say it was a huge emotional experience. A lot of times religious experiences are just that. They can be very, very emotional, powerful, and life-changing experiences. Mine was a little bit more, I had, since I was 16, and I have to kind of back up here and just, I meant to give the disclaimer in the beginning, but it would help to say that, again, I did have, when I was 16, a very powerful experience of God. Now, I've been noticing on some of our other presenters, they have some interesting opinions to just the opposite, and I respect that. Again, I'm not here to convert anybody. I'm not here to proselytize anybody. There's an old saying, and I think I'll just employ it because I think it really makes sense to me, and it's true, is that for those who don't believe, no explanation is possible, and for those who do believe, no explanation is necessary. And so when you try to argue from a facts-based or historical-based or a scientific base for something of faith, it just doesn't work one way or the other. So again, I do believe that anybody can experience God if they choose to do so, but it's your choice. So, and if that's not what you're into and you don't want to go down that path, then no one's forcing you to. So, but anyway, so I had this powerful experience when I was 16 years old, and then the rest of my life for the last, 30 some odd years has been an attempt to put it in some kind of perhaps a theological construct or framework in order to kind of maybe make sense of it a little bit more. Again, what we really celebrate in things like the Mass and the sacraments and even faith itself is our mysteries. There's beautiful, beautiful mysteries of the grace of God in our lives. Okay? So that's my preaching for there. That's it. That's all I'm going to do as far as preaching goes. So anyway, so getting back to my Catholic experience in the first Mass, all of a sudden when Father John held up the Holy Eucharist for the very first time, that's where the priest will hold up the chalice and the bread, little cup, and the round host, or what some people call a wafer, and said, "Behold, this is Jesus, our Savior and our brother, here in our midst. Blessed are those who are called to the supper of the Lamb." There was a knowing. That's all I can say. There was a knowing that somehow that experience of the Eucharist was very, very real to me. So anyway, and to say it was not totally emotional, it wasn't like maybe like a revival meeting where you're overcome by emotion, but there's something very real. And again, we even affectionately in Catholic circles, we know of this called the real presence of Christ in the Eucharist. So I was still going to college. I finished my junior college. I went on to Sac State, again where Tom Hanks went to college. And then I became a Catholic school teacher, and from there I finally made an official conversion to the Catholic Church. And then a year and a half later, I was on my way to seminary, St. Patrick's Seminary in Menlo Park, California. Now, let me go back and just take a little explanation why I call myself a YouTube horror host. And I'm doing this Bob Wilkins kind of a theme here. There's a reason for that. And it may not make sense, and it may not even be very clear. But one of the things about Bob Wilkins was he was a very non-pretentious person. You know, if you follow the history of the horror genre on TV syndication, a lot of the horror hosts would get into campy costumes like Elvira and Count Scary, and there's a whole host of them, no pun intended. But and so it was a shtick that they would do. And so when Bob Wilkins came on and introduced the horror films, he was kind of just this basic guy who was unpretentious. He wasn't being anybody but himself. And to me, that seems to make sense of priesthood today, because right now the priesthood is in a lot of trouble. You don't need me to tell you that. But that's the sad reality. And sometimes we as priests, we kind of get ourselves caught up into all sorts of political problems. You can find yourself trying to defend certain positions, and and sometimes you find yourself, instead of really trying to get to know people and try to just be their friend, you find yourself sometimes getting yourself into hot political discussions, and at the end of the day, it doesn't really lead anywhere. There are a lot of hot button issues right now in the. I think I got a bug crawling in my hair. What little hair I have left. And sometimes you can argue, whether you're arguing against an atheist, you're arguing against another Christian of another denomination, you're arguing against somebody who is vehemently opposed to what the Catholic Church stands for on certain social issues of the day. Well, at the very end, all you find is that you have really accomplished nothing. All you do is walk away angry. Both people usually do, and you have accomplished nothing. And so, for me, the kind of a role model for trying to be a padre today is kind of just being a non-pretentious person, trying to be who you are. Trying to say this is the real me, as Jay would say, and trying to just meet people where they're at. And to me, it seems to work. There are still a lot of people who struggle with all sorts of issues in their own life, not just the political hot button issues, but their own personal struggles. We all have personal struggles. I have personal struggles. And so, for me, I think the best way to be a padre in today's world is trying to be just, kind of an open, kind of a non-judgmental person. Somebody, and again, if somebody comes to me and asks me what the church teaches on a certain issue, I'm going to tell them, what I believe is the truth. I'm going to have to tap this out here. But at the end of the day, I have found in my almost 20 years that it just doesn't work when you argue with people. And I've been there, I've done that, and sometimes the best thing you can do is just listen to somebody, even if they're angry, and they're upset. Just listen to them. And you can be honest and say, I don't know if I have an answer for you. I don't know if I could help you. I would love to help you, but maybe what you're going through is something I just can't relate to. I can pray for you. I can be your friend. I can kind of, be a sounding board. So that's why I really kind of find an affectionate spot in my heart for Bob Wilkins and John Stanley, as they were just guys that loved what they were doing. It's important to love what you're doing. And other times, I'll be honest, it's difficult being a padre in this day and age. It's painful sometimes, very painful. And not only do you go through the kind of the problems of the day. You know, you also go through your own personal problems, and I've certainly gone through personal problems trying to be a priest. It's not always been easy. But you know, you still have to, in some ways, choose every day your vocation. A vocation's a very special thing. You know, and the Catholic Church believes that there are several avenues of vocation. You know, marriage for the sake of the kingdom, priesthood for the sake of the kingdom, religious consecrated life for the sake of the kingdom, and even you know, single specialized ministries for the sake of the kingdom, apostolates. So, you know, and one of the things I will say this about being a Catholic is that there is a large umbrella. We used to use that term quite a bit. That kind of takes in just about everybody. Now, we all don't agree on everything. There's an old saying, you know, in the essentials, unity, and the non-essentials, diversity, or liberté, but in all things, charity. You know, so at the end of the day, you know, that motto seems to really be the one that makes a lot of sense to me. And interesting, my ordination cards, because I didn't have a lot of money when I was getting ordained. I got some very simple, humble. St. Francis of Assisi would have been probably pretty proud. They were just, they weren't really even on cardstock. They were kind of just basic, well, when they'd say newsprint, but it was a step up between newsprint, you know, from newsprint. But on my back of my card was Micah 6:8, you know, this is what the Lord requires of you, that you know, act justly, walk humbly with your God, you know, and love mercy, do justice, and walk humbly with your God. And I don't say I have fully lived that out. I'm in the process of trying to do that every day. It's not easy, and some days are harder than others. But you know, and I've gone through difficulties being a priest. I'll be very honest about that. But in the end, I'm still here. I guess that's the thing. I have a commitment. You know, I think that's what it boils down to, is a commitment at the end. I've been told by some people that are married that you have good years and you have bad years. I would have to say this year has been pretty difficult for me. I've met some good friends, I want to say, here on YouTube, who actually have even helped me through some personal struggles, believe it or not, and I thank them, and they know who they are. And if you're watching this video, again, I want to say thank you to you, and to you. You know who you are, and you've been very helpful with your comments and videos. And everybody, and to some extent, just being able to kind of have a little bit of an avocation in this pipe presenter community. So it's been a real blessing for me in that regard. So as I celebrate 20 years of being a padre, I want to say thank you for putting up with this extremely long video. I hope that some of you have asked me, you know, personal questions about the faith, about, you know, my vocation. Maybe this goes a little ways to maybe answering some of your questions. So with that, I wanted to say good night, and light up your world. Light up a pipe or a cigar, and you know, enjoy life. Take care.